Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Perspectivity. In today's episode, you're going to get to learn about my friend, Leonardo from Colombia, a neurologist who tells an incredible story about how he came to America, creating an unbelievable life for himself, and also how he prioritized certain aspects of his life that he would never let go of, including traveling the world and having a deep connection to his family in really unique ways. As you enter this episode, I want you to just think about what it's like to come to America from another country, and also what it's like to have to compare and think about your life in America compared to your previous country. What are the ways that that gives you more appreciation for what you get when you get here or the life that you're having? And then what are the things that you might miss, things that are different from your previous country or where you came from? I loved this episode. It was an absolutely incredible time, and I hope that you can experience some of the inspiration that I got to have spending time with Leo. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Perspectivity. Today, I'm with my new friend, Leo. Leo, would you mind just introducing yourself?
Sure. So I'm Leo Morantes, originally from Colombia. Moved to the States back in 1998 with the dream of becoming a neurosurgeon. Halfway through it, decided not to, and now I'm a vascular neurologist here in North Carolina.
Wow, it's incredible. I'm excited. Today, we're going to walk through your life story.
Sure.
And going through your life story, our goal is just to explore what your life has kind of looked like and see what insights come out as we do that. And so, to get us kind of kicked off and get started, I'd like to ask you, what is a moment from your younger childhood, kind of your earliest memories, that brings you joy when you think about it?
Wow, so many. Uh, Most of them was when my family from the States will come and visit. That to me was when everybody was happy, everybody was together. I came from a poor origin. And so when my aunts will come from the U.S., they typically were a little more affluent, and we had things like cereal, which we would never had otherwise. And the house was full with people. All the family will converge in one house and spend time together, and we will go to bed late. And those are probably the happiest memories that I have from my time growing up.
Wow. Excuse me, you said cereal? You
Yeah,
would have cereal, which you didn't normally have?
correct. Yeah, that was a luxury. And so whenever they would come, my cousins were used to eating cereal, and so my aunts would go and buy cereal, and we would have cereal only when they would come.
Wow. So, what would you have instead of cereal?
Coffee is the staple breakfast for a Colombian household, or at least for me, it was like coffee with bread or some sort of pastry, sometimes eggs.
That's amazing. Thinking of cereal as a luxury here.
Yeah.
That's
Plus my mom, Bogota, where I grew up, is a very cold city. And so my mom doesn't consider anything that's not warm breakfast. So breakfast was more like cereal was more like something that you can have at breakfast, but that doesn't quite qualify as breakfast. It's got to be warm because it's got to warm you up and give you a good start to the day.
wow. That's amazing. So, paint the context for me a little bit. You're growing up in Colombia. You, what's your family look like? Do you have any brothers and sisters? Like, what's the house look like?
Yeah. So my parents got divorced when I was 9. And so my household, for the most part, was my mom, my brother, and sister. My brother is 7 years older, my sister 9 years older, and so I was the little one at home.
The little one, the baby. Did you
Right.
get any special treatment being the little one?
Well, I kind of got picked on by my siblings because they will get in trouble when anything happened to me because they were supposed to watch me, I guess. And so, like, if I'd fall or something, they'd get crap for it. So they didn't really like that so much.
Wow. That's amazing. And during your childhood, so you mentioned divorced at 9. What was that like for you? Just that experience?
Well, I don't really have that many memories of living with my dad. I mean, of course, I have a few, but at home things had gotten a little tough towards the end, and so I think that despite the fact that it was sad to see my dad leave, we were happy afterwards. I mean, not we didn't have to worry about what time he's going to come back. Is he going to be inebriated or things like that?
I can empathize with that a lot. That was a lot of my childhood growing up. There was a lot of tension for some of those same reasons. So thinking about that childhood, and this is always tough, but I like to invite people to do this. If you had to title the chapter of your life that was your childhood, what would you title it and why?
Never really thought about that question. Uh, you know, despite the fact that I did not realize the things that I was lacking, you can't miss what you don't know about. And so, despite the fact that there was scarcity, uh, it never really felt that bad. So I think it's ignorance is bliss.
Wow, that's really powerful. Because to you, you didn't know that cereal could be a normal part of your everyday breakfast, right?
Right. I think I got the first time that I tried peanut butter, I was 16.
What?
Yeah, it's not quite a staple in Colombia as it is here. And back in the day, many years ago, I tried to get peanut butter in Colombia, and it was the equivalent of like $9 for a little thing. So it's one of those things.
That's fascinating to hear. Because as a kid in America, peanut butter and jelly, that's
Right.
like the main thing that you get to eat, you get
That's what I
excited
had for
for.
breakfast this morning.
That's what you had today. That's beautiful. Now it's like, now you can have whatever you want for breakfast, right?
Right.
Wow, okay. So walk me through in your childhood, you start to head towards your teenage years. What was kind of the defining moment? You mentioned your first chapter was ignorance is bliss. What do you think was the first kind of moment or experience that kind of awakened you out of that ignorance and kind of drew you into seeing the world a little bit more complexly?
Right. Well, I Christmas or New Year's, 1993, I heard a song at a mall. I was there with my sister, and it was "I Will Do Anything for Love, but I Won't Do That" by Meatloaf. And that song, for some reason, awakened something within me that I just only felt that day. And I know that it was one of those 2 days, and I became obsessed with that song. And that song led me to learn a lot about his music, and not only Meatloaf, but Jim Steinman, who also composed Total Eclipse of the Heart and Making Love Out of Nothing at All, which are my two favorite songs. And so to find out that this same guy composed three songs sung by different people, who all of them were my favorite, it just kind of started this interest in me. And so that, I think music literally changed that part of my life, and it became the most important thing at that time for me.
Wow. So music created an awakening. You were growing up in Colombia, right? So you were speaking Spanish.
Correct.
Meatloaf was not in Spanish, right?
No, and I did not understand anything at the beginning.
Really?
Right.
So you were falling in love with this song and you didn't even really understand it at all?
Correct. It took a
Oh.
while to even, this is back before, like, internet was available, but it was not something I had. I didn't even have a computer at the time. So I'd have to go to the library and look up the lyrics. But at that time, you even had to pay for the internet at the library. It was, this is Colombia back in, we're talking about 1994, 95. And I will download the lyrics, print them, and then start translating the songs and trying to sing, even though I'm not a good singer by any stretch of the imagination. But that's basically how I started learning English. And then many of the themes of Meatloaf's music became themes of my life. Uh, so that was a very powerful, for me, influence in, say 13 on until I moved to this country.
Wow. That's really powerful because when I think about learning language, you need a motivation, you need a reason. Maybe you fall in love with someone who speaks a different language or something happens for you. How did hearing Meatloaf and wanting to understand that music influence your relationship with the English language?
Well, I became obsessed with, I have to understand what this says because I felt it, and I actually listen to music in about 30 different languages now. I have a huge collection on like YouTube, and I have music that I enjoy, and I can listen to music in Turkish, French, Italian, German, Persian. I listen to music that I can feel because I don't have to understand it, I can feel it. But with Meatloaf's music, I felt it, but then I wanted to understand it. and so I went into more depth with the songs, and many songs, like Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire, that's one of Meatloaf's songs. That was number 5 on that CD, and it's just all these things. But and so I learned a lot about English from the music, but then also I learned about, there was one song. It says, "I don't need no gold watch in 50 years, baby. Let's be golden today." He says in that song, they hand you a paycheck every week and steal a piece of your soul every day. And so that's powerful. And that's the way that I live my life now. I don't need a gold watch in 50 years. I want to be golden today.
Wow. This is really hitting me because I'm thinking about, I too connect with music. Music has been kind of the main thing that influenced my desire to learn about culture. And I grew up listening to Eminem and a bunch of rappers, and I became obsessed with hip hop culture at like around this, like 10, 11 years old. And I wanted to understand hip hop culture because I felt the music. It's interesting that you said it. It wasn't about language for me, but it was that I really wanted to understand what brought about these people who could make me feel this way. That's really something. I'd never thought about that before you saying that. That's really powerful. Okay, so you're in your teenage years. Did you ever have a crush during your teenage years?
Several. Several. Wow. Yeah. So many. I was just talking to my wife about it, and all these little crushes I had. Or, well, not even little. I mean, I was obsessed with many of them. And I remember, I stay in touch with a few of them because we became friends with a few of them after the fact, and it's nice.
Was there ever a really special one, like one that really sticks out during that time?
Well, yeah. There's one from when I lived in Colombia, probably the most powerful of all of them. But then after that, I had a girlfriend, and in a way, it was just the most important defining person of my childhood, I guess, and adolescence.
Wow.
It was actually a breakup that led me to move to this country.
Real? Tell me more. What happened?
Right. So we had been dating for a while, but her mom didn't know. Her mom loved me as a friend, but and then after we had been together for about a year, over a year, I told her, "Well, I wanted to tell your mom. I just feel weird. Why can't we tell your mom?" And she said, "It's not a good idea." And I guess I made the mistake of saying, "Well, I'm going to tell your mom." And I told her, and then I went from being little Leo to being that guy, or that dude, I guess the equivalent of in Spanish.
What is that in Spanish?
Ese tipo.
Ese tipo?
Right.
That
means
dude?
like that dude, or that guy, or that. It's a despondent way, I guess, of speaking about a man. But she loved me before, but she didn't want me anywhere near her daughter. And so that put a lot of strain in the relationship, and we ended up going separate ways. I mean, we used to kind of jokingly break up all the time, but that time it was for real. And, I was used to being with her all the time, and I felt like, what's my life going to be like? You're 17, your girlfriend of 1.5 years splits, and now what? And so in a way, I felt, well, my life is never going to be the same, so I don't want to be here, but just without her. So I think it's easier to just go somewhere and just at least fill my mind with something new. And that's what made me move to this country.
Wow. Okay, so I can definitely empathize with that. I've been through a pretty bad breakup that changed my life. So you decided to go to America after this breakup, and we've talked before this interview. You weren't out of high school yet, right?
I was halfway through my senior year when I moved.
And so walk me through that. Like, you're halfway through. You're almost done. Why not finish and come later? Why'd you come right at that moment?
I know my willpower was not the greatest. It's still not. And I felt that if I had something to come back to, I'd probably will give up. But if I had nothing to come back to, I'd have to suck it up. And so leaving halfway, plus that was the moment at which I needed a change. Sometimes you just know that this is the time at which something has got to change, and you have the activation energy to make it happen. And I did at the time. I think if I had waited, not only will I not have the need to succeed because I didn't have anything to come back to, but I also probably would have, forgotten about the girl or met somebody else and then just kind of stayed there. But at that time, I just needed to make something happen. Something needed to change in my life.
So how'd you do it? How'd you make it to America? You're not out of high school and you come over here. What
Right.
happened?
Well, so I called my uncle. My uncle had lived in the States for several years, 20 plus years. He was a citizen. And I asked him, he actually had sent me a business card for a woman who helped with scholarships and exchange programs, but for the university. And he sent it with my grandmother when she came to the States. And then she gave me the card when she went back to Colombia. And it just kind of planted a small seed in my head. And then when the breakup happened, then I called my uncle and I said, "Hey, if I tried to come to the States, would you be able to help me?" And he told me, "Well, I'm going through a divorce and I'm staying with your aunt's ex-husband. Uh, but if he's okay with it, I'm going to ask him if he's okay with it. Then I guess you can come over." And then he called me next day and he said, I talked to him and he said, "Yeah, sure." And so I sold whatever music I could sell. Meatloaf was not a big seller at that time, but I had some Michael Jackson and Bon Jovi and Aerosmith CDs. So I sold those and I got my passport and I applied for the visa. And luckily, I got approved for the tourist visa, of course. And I came in as a tourist, but then I enrolled in school. And then I kept extending my stay in the country because I wanted to remain legally here.
Wow. That's just fascinating because on this tour, for our listeners, many of you know that I'm traveling all 50 United States and meeting people from all walks of life, Leo included. And some of the people we've met have immigrated here. Some from Colombia, actually, some from other countries. And every immigration story is different. Every single one. But one of the core themes that's been the same is everyone had this idea that there was a dream that they could make happen here. Did you believe in the American dream at that time? Did that mean something to you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you always hear, all the stories, people moving here. I mean, my aunts and uncle had moved here 20 plus or almost 30 years prior to my moving here. And, their lives were clearly better than the lives of those who had stayed behind. They were not easy, but they were better. I mean, of course, I think it's a tough assessment to make, but they had more things and things seemed easier for them than they were for us, the Colombian family, if you will.
Wow.
Plus, in Colombia, it's very hard to, I mean, you have to have money to go to school unless you're really, really smart. And I was not that smart. I'm not that smart. So, and in Colombia, you have to be either nice looking or well off. You don't have to, but it helps a lot if you are. And I was neither. So I said, well, I need to find a place that I can actually maybe do something with my life.
Wow. Wow, that's really powerful to me because uh, you're a wildly successful neurologist who I think you're a pretty good looking guy. So I'm listening to that and I'm thinking the pressure that people must have felt, at least at that time where you were at in Colombia, that seems like a lot of pressure. Um, that's fascinating to think about. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, so you get here. You're like, how old are you? 17 when
17.
Wow. So what happened when you got here? What was it like? Like, what was it like coming over? How'd you come across the border? How'd you come and where'd you end up stopping?
So I flew to Miami from Bogota. Then my cousin picked me up. At that time, he drove a 7 Series BMW, which was my ultimate favorite car. It was not a brand new car, but it was a very nice car. So my arrival in the U.S., it was like, whoa, I get to ride in a 7 Series. And it's Miami and it's sunny and he lives in this beautiful neighborhood. And I'm like, whoa, this is great. And then 6 p.m. rolls up and the sun is still out. In Colombia, the sun goes down at 5:50. And then 7 p.m. and the sun's still out. And 8 p.m. and I was like, whoa, is the day ever going to end? And I had no clue that the days could last that long. It was not until about 9 p.m. This is July 23rd. It was not until 9 p.m. or so that the sun went down. And I'm like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. Plus the weather was nice. It was quite exciting coming to America.
So all of a sudden you have like 3 or 4 more hours of day, which is pretty wild, especially to a 17-year-old. And then, wow, what an entry. And so walk me through there. You enrolled in school, right?
Right. So my uncle had already gone to the school before I even came, and he filled out this paperwork, and he was my guardian. So he became my guardian, and so he did the guardianship thing. And then my uncle was very hands-on. He died several years ago. Actually, today is the 14th, right? So he actually died January 14th of 2012. So 11 years ago. But he was an amazing person. He actually took me the day that he picked me up, because I arrived on the 23rd, and then he drove to Miami a few days later, and then brought me to Orlando on the 28th. That's where I lived my first year and a half. And on the 28th, when we arrived to Orlando, first thing he did, he took me to the driver's license, got the paperwork, the booklet. I went to took my class about drinking while driving and all these things that you had to take a class. And then the next day I was there getting my permit. And he was hands-on. He did not wait a minute to take care of things. He would take care of things just immediately. And August 10th, I started as a senior at University High School in Orlando.
What was it like entering a new school in America,
Well, schools in Colombia, you wear a uniform, and here there's no uniform. And all I had, my uncle got me some clothes, but in Colombia I had jeans and stuff. And this is Orlando in August. Girls are wearing skimpy shorts and all sorts of things that I had too many distractions that I did not even expect. I went to an all-male Catholic school in Colombia, and we were all wearing uniforms. It was jeans and a blue sweater. And here, I was always wearing jeans, and I just got so hot. And then I wouldn't talk to people because people spoke different. I understood everything that the teachers will say. Like, I had never, ever any problem understanding my classes, but my peers, they just spoke differently. I just couldn't quite get what they were saying. Maybe if they were speaking to one another, I would catch some, but if they would talk to me, I guess I'd freeze or something. I was not used to speaking English. I was used to listening to it and maybe trying to sing along, but I was not really used to actually carrying a conversation.
So what did that feel like? That idea of how would you describe that experience of kind of being there but not being able to just communicate with your peers? What was that like for you?
It was a little bit frustrating, I guess. I didn't really make many friends that first year. I mean, I think I stay in touch with about 3 or 4 friends from my high school period here in the States. So, I mean, when I think of high school, I really think of Colombia as my high school. But there's a few people from that period of time that I still keep in touch with.
Wow, that's actually a common theme in America. That a lot of times people will forget about people from high school and they won't have any friends, which has always shocked me. In Colombia, is it like that, or is it different in Colombia? Do you stay friends a long time?
Oh, we stay friends forever. I'm actually who makes when I go back to Colombia, I am the one who organizes the high school reunions. Even though I didn't graduate from my Colombian high school, but I'm still the one who organizes the reunions when I go back.
And you stay friends forever?
Well, pretty much. I mean, I still talk to at least 40, 50 people from high school, and we have a WhatsApp group, and we uh, are in constant communication pretty much.
Oh my God,
I mean, of course, not every single person, but with a large portion of them.
that's incredible. I mean, for people listening to this on the podcast, that's probably shocking. And I invite you, if you're listening to this, to consider, I mean, how many friends do you actively talk to from your high school period? I mean, I have like 5 to 10, and most people I talk to, they have almost zero, unless maybe they stayed in that hometown area, then they have a couple. But that's shocking to hear. I don't hear that hardly ever.
Yeah, the last meeting that I organized, which was probably 4 years ago, I mean, it was about 33 people, which is not that many, but some of the earlier ones had like 70, and many of us live abroad, and so when I travel, I try to see my friends who live abroad.
Okay, so you made it through high school, you graduated, I assume, right?
Right.
Coming out of high school, what the heck do you do now?
Well, so that was the problem. You see, I was on a tourist visa, and I kept writing to the immigration services saying, oh, I'm still enjoying my time here, I'm getting to see this, and then they will extend. I would use very nice language to try to get them to extend my stay. And so they extended my stay 3 or 4 times, each time 6 months. And then finally I said, well, I gotta do something. after I graduated from high school, I got this scholarship, the Florida Bright Future Scholarship, because you had to get a GPA or whatever. I think I had a 1210 or something anyway. But I qualified for 75% off, but because I was not a resident or a citizen of the United States, I couldn't use it. So my dream was to go to UF. I wanted to be a Gator, but I couldn't go because, of course, I couldn't afford it. And the scholarship that I earned, I couldn't use because I was neither a resident nor a citizen. And so I had to then apply for a student visa, but that was tricky because I didn't really have the money to pay for school. But you find ways that you can finally get some affidavit form, and my aunt helped me with that, and then I was able to get a student visa. And so it took about a year or so, and then finally June 7th of 2000, I started in Georgia at a 2-year college. I started the summer semester, and that was when I started my academic career.
Wow. That's incredible to hear. It's like you find your way, you get here, you have this scholarship that's sitting there, and you're like, I can't have it, but you have this opportunity, which also speaks to how did you do so well in school with your English? I mean, you mentioned you could hear. How did you learn English?
I learned it with music.
So this Meatloaf, the time you spent listening to Meatloaf, would you really say you learned the language primarily through music?
Yeah, of course. Everybody learns. Everybody at school we have English class, but so did every single one of my classmates, and they really cannot speak any English. So whatever we got at school was really not enough. I mean, you can get a PhD in the verb to be, but that's all you can. At the end of 11 years of education, you can say I am, you are, he is, she is, but that's it. You don't really get you advance in your English knowledge in high school. So I really used music as a way to learn the language. And it was not only Meatloaf. I mean, Meatloaf was by far the main one, but it was also Queen, Earth Supply, Chicago, ballads, because it was easy to understand.
Wow. So that excites me as a psychologist. One of the things I've studied a lot is motivation. It's actually what got me into psychology. How do people become motivated to do things with their life? And what I love hearing here is that music, your desire to like understand and connect with the things that made you feel a certain way, really motivated you to learn language, and it worked. I mean, obviously you did very well in school when you got here, and then you go into college. Before we dive into the college years, I guess I'd just like to ask you, when you first entered America, if I asked you this question, what does it mean to be American? What do you think you might have said or thought?
Well, before I moved to this country, I figured that when I got here, everybody was going to be tall, blonde, blue-eyed, or some shade of white. But this was by far a much more diverse country than I ever expected. You see, in Colombia, all my friends were from Colombia. I mean, I had one friend who was from the coast of Colombia, and he was the exotic guy at school. The rest of us were pretty much from Bogota. So to go to a classroom in which people are from all sorts of places, different, not only different states, but I mean, my best friend was from Kuwait. My second best friend was from Albania, and I actually just saw him a couple months ago, and he lives in DC now. And so I mean, Kuwait, Albania, there were some guys from Puerto Rico, lots of people from South America. There was a girl who was half Thai, half Dutch. Another one was from Thailand. I mean, it was so exciting to see that this was a microcosmos of the world, and that's something that I really started loving about my experience here. Is that I was used to such a tiny little spectrum of the whole gamut of colors we have, and coming to America was just like, whoa. I mean, now I have a little passport into all of these places by talking to my friends and seeing what they eat and listening to their language, even though I don't understand anything. But it really opened my mind to the fact that we have this huge world and that we only get to see a little bit of it.
Wow, that's powerful. And for people listening, you might have the thought arise like, well, that can happen in other places. Some cities, cultural centers around the world, you might be able to see that as well. And I just want to invite you, if that's something that you're thinking, because it comes up a lot in these kinds of conversations, is just to notice that America just was an example, at least in your life, of a place where you could find that. And that hits me really deep because when I think about what it means to be American, I think about it being a country where anybody can come and build a life from anywhere else in the world. I see it as that melting pot idea. Um, and certainly there's areas of America that aren't like that. But it's cool to hear that for you, it actually was a gateway into that. I appreciate that. Okay. So I wanted to touch on something that we talked about before this interview. When, when you're born in America, we talked about this and it shocked me. I didn't know this. If you came over here from Colombia and had a child, and that child was born in America, that child is American.
Correct.
How, now, what if that happened in Colombia?
It wouldn't be Colombian.
It wouldn't be Colombian. So if I went and had a child in Colombia right now, they would not be Colombian, right?
Correct.
And they would not get citizenship in Colombia.
Correct. So you don't get citizen by birth. That's birthright or citizen by birth doesn't exist in Colombia. Now, of course, I was born in Colombia and I'm a Colombian citizen, but my parents are Colombian, and for many generations we've been Colombian. But you can't just have a child in Colombian soil and your child be Colombian. That doesn't happen. And it's not the only country. Many countries, at least in Colombia, there's such a thing as naturalization. You can become a citizen of Colombia. Not necessarily by being born there, but you can go through the process of naturalization. But there are many countries in the world in which there's no naturalization. There's no way that somebody can become a citizen of that country.
That's fascinating. And I wanted to just bring that up because when you told me that, it was one of the first things we talked about when I arrived a couple days ago. And I was just shocked. I just had never thought about it. It just seemed like that must be the way it works. And I appreciate you highlighting that. Okay, so thinking about that, what was your favorite music when you were getting ready to start college? Before we jump into the college years, what was your favorite music or band or artist? What were you into?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that I still listen to the same stuff. To this day, I still listen to the same stuff largely. I don't really stay updated with music. My brother, who's older than me, knows more about like current music than I do. I love the 80s. I'm stuck in the 80s. That's what I love. That's what I listen to for the most part. But I think once I was in college, I remember not necessarily going into college, but while I was at college in Atlanta, I remember like Nickelback was a big one. They actually had free concerts in Atlanta in the summer. And lots of people came. I mean, I remember Nickelback, Alanis Morissette came. There was this Josh Joplin was, I think, a local band. But those were kind of like the things that I remember from that time. But I think Nickelback was probably Matchbox 20. This is all like in the college years.
Wow, it's fascinating. So when you started college, what'd you want to do? What'd you major in? What'd you think a career would be?
Well, so I knew I wanted to be and I think I told you about this. When I moved to this country, my friend from Kuwait actually helped me create an email, and it was Brain Surgery 33, because I counted the years, and by 33, I would finish all the educational steps to become a neurosurgeon, and that was my goal. And 33 also, I was a Christian at the time, I was a Catholic, and Jesus fulfilled his mission at 33, and at that time I figured, well, I'll do mine too by 33, and so that was Brain Surgery 33, and so I wanted to be a neurosurgeon. And so when I started college, I was basically in the chemistry, biology, pre-med kind of mix. But I started a 2-year college because that's really all I could afford.
Wow. So you could go into this 2-year college and start building towards that. And in addition to like studying, trying to become a neurosurgeon, what were your goals in addition to that? Was it singularly that's it? Were there more distracting crushes along the way?
Well, so the funny thing is that, so I started college, of course, but I didn't know anybody. I had lived in Orlando pretty much up until the time that I started college. But then my uncle moved to Atlanta. My mom and sister actually moved to Atlanta too. My brother moved. So everybody moved after I did. You know, within a year and a half, my brother, sister, and mom had also moved to the States. And so my uncle, with whom I had initially moved to Atlanta. my aunt, who had lived for 20 plus years in Texas, moved to Atlanta. And so Atlanta became home. And so that when I think of my hometown in the States, I think of Atlanta. That's where my sister lives. That's where I spend Christmas and New Year's. My cousins live there. And so to me, home is Atlanta. And so we came to Atlanta, but I didn't know anybody in Atlanta. I mean, of course, my family, and those were happy times because now I was reunited with my mom, my brother, my sister, my aunt, my cousins, my uncle. My aunt bought a house with a pool, and we will go every weekend to the pool and have a good time, and it was great. Um, and so, but I didn't really have many friends, and I was in college, and I started in the summer. Uh, and initially, I didn't have much else going on for me other than working because I had a student visa. I was allowed to work 20 hours during school session, and on vacation, I could work 40 hours. So I worked at the registrar's office at college, and that's how I would pay my minimum payments on a credit card with which I would pay my tuition. So I would pay my tuition with the credit card, and then I would work my 20 hours a week to make the minimum payments to be able to keep going to school.
That's really powerful. Again, for people listening, a lot of people don't know this, but if you have a student visa, you're limited in how much you can work in school, like you mentioned. So I've met plenty of people who they can't pick up an extra job, even if they want to, as a student to support their life or support their lifestyle. And if you're a citizen, you can. You can work as much more as you want. And I always thought that was interesting because I had friends who were like, I want to work more, but I can't work more. I'm not allowed to. And I'm sure there's some reasons for that, but that was something that always shocked me. That you can't just go do that. Wow. Okay. So you're doing that. You have a family, like you led the way. Your whole family came to Atlanta, which I love Atlanta, by the way. That's one of my favorite cities in the US. I'm going to be there in a couple months. It's one of my absolute favorite cities. It's a cultural hub, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just deep rooted culture. It's got so much character. I love Atlanta. You get into that. You did 2 years. Where's your next?
Well, so actually, I did almost 3 years because this was a very inexpensive place to stay going to school. Not only that, but I became involved in student government. And so I initially started as I forgot, maybe a committee member, then I became a senator, then I became treasurer, and then I became president of student government. And that actually opened my shell because I was very much an introvert. And also because I was in a different country and everything was new and English was the language, and I just didn't feel quite confident. And it was not until my student government time that I started breaking through that shell. And then once I became president, I was able to talk to anybody, talk to large groups of people, and not really sweat it or think about it twice or anything. So student government really helped me develop my personality and develop a lot of different skills that I was lacking. So that was and so I stayed there, and by being in student government also decreased my tuition. And then because of my grades, I was able to apply for a fee waiver, so it will waive the out-of-state portion of tuition. So basically, I was going to school for free. And so at the beginning, I was paying, but then after that, I was almost able to go to school but for very little money. And so that was a good place for me to stay. But at the same time, they couldn't award me a bachelor's degree no matter how long I stayed there. So I had to at some point make the jump.
Wow. That's incredible to think. And I resonate with that because I did a lot of student groups, including student government. I was a liaison to the student government in the main campus I went to at Ohio State. And I did the same thing, build up scholarships, found ways to waive fees. And to me, I was always like, this is an incredible thing. It's like the more I invest in my community, the more I'm rewarded and I get an amazing education while this amazing opportunity to serve, and I could do it at a low cost and get a quality education. Is that what your experience was? I mean, was
Yeah,
it all different?
absolutely. Absolutely. It was great. And they actually, when I became the president, they actually sponsored me to go on a leadership conference. It was an international youth leadership conference in the Czech Republic. And I mean, I had to pay part of it, but they helped me make it possible. And then I traveled. That was my first trip outside of, the States. Uh, and it was amazing. And I met people from again all over the place, and it was just again this whole diversity that I enjoy so much. People from Turkey, from different Middle Eastern countries, from several European countries, from South America, and it was just great. and it opened my mind even more about the things that you can do.
Wow. Was there anything, you have so much gratitude, and I really appreciate it. I can see it in your eyes when you talk about this. You have so much gratitude for all the opportunities that you had. I want to ask because we all have things we like and don't like about our country or our world or our setting, about anything. Was there anything that you really didn't like in America that you had liked more in Colombia? I mean, I'm not comparing them as better or worse, but things you're like, I don't understand why this is this way.
Yeah. So here you endure a lot of loneliness. I do. And I do, even though I'm an active person. I mean, I'm an active person. I have a job. I have friends. I'm active in society, I feel. But for instance, for my mother to be in this country, it was so alienating. She felt left alone most of the time. She moved back to Colombia several years ago, and I tried to bring her back last year, and she was here for like 3 weeks. And said, I can't stand it. I'm gonna go nuts. And I said, okay, mom, go back. Uh, there's loneliness. Everybody here is doing their own thing, and I mean it's a good thing. But we're a very individualistic society, I think, here in the States. People, everybody is worried about advancing their career and working on their own stuff, which is great. It's a very productive way. In Colombia, I don't have to call my friends to tell them I'm coming. I just ring the doorbell and they stop whatever they're doing and we have a good time. And whatever they were doing, they'll continue to do at some point later today, tomorrow, or whenever. So here to see my best friend, I almost have to make an appointment. I have to plan well in advance, and this is like there's never time. And you see, in Colombia, it doesn't work like that.
That's incredible. That reminds me of being a kid. You just like kind of walk up to your friends' houses. Hey, so and so here. Can they play? And it's like, yeah, of course. Here we go. When you just play,
Yeah,
and now it's like, yeah, open up your Here's a link to my Calendly app, and you can schedule. Make sure you use the link that says Fun Time and click that one
right.
and pick. And that's my experience now. That's fascinating. I appreciate that perspective. So you did like about 3 years in Atlanta, and then where'd you go from there to finish your degree? And what'd you study there? Was it all just kind of
So I
pre-med
think my
type?
I think my associate's degree is in, I think it's either pre-med or chemistry, one of the two. The programs were so similar that it didn't really make a big difference. Then I went to UAB, and I was
University
originally
of Alabama, right?
at Birmingham, right?
Birmingham, that's right.
And so I was initially a chemistry major, but I got into a little argument with the chair of chemistry, and so I figured, well, maybe I'll just switch to biology. So I ended up as a biologist from UAB.
Wow. I'm gonna feel free to reject this, but I'm really curious. What kind of argument?
Well, so he was the chair of the department, and he was writing something on the board, and then he deleted it, and then he was like, okay, and then write something else on the board, and he deleted it again, and I was just like a little upset. I mean, he teaches one class per semester. It was a biochemistry too. It's only for chemistry majors, it's a very advanced class, and he just had to keep referring to his notes, and then he will delete, and then in a very I just asked my friend to let me look at the book because I didn't take my book that day. And I just said, can I look at your book? And that's it. I mean, it was so silent, but I think he was trying to get the attention away from him. And he said, it would be so much easier if I were the only one talking here. And I said, it will be so much easier if you know what you're doing.
Oh,
And of course, you can hear the silence. You can hear a pin drop in the back of the room, because apparently you don't talk like that to I guess, a case of insubordination. But the thing is, I was not doing anything wrong. I mean, it's not like I was talking or anything, And I think that I just didn't appreciate the fact that the chair has so little respect for his class, his teaching. The only one class per semester he teaches, that to not even be prepared for that, and then to pick on me just because I want to look at the textbook. It's just like, okay.
that's funny. Everybody has either been that person or seen that person who challenges the teacher. And in America, that's common to have someone in a class do that. I don't know if in Colombia people challenge teachers in college, but it's pretty common here. You'll see it occasionally. Not a lot, but every
Well,
once in a while.
I think, I mean, not that I'm always challenging, but in Colombia, the one time that I will have been the first kid in my class. I was never the first in my class. I was typically in the top five, but I was never the first. The only one time in which that would have happened, there was an error in my bullet in my grade report card, and instead of a 97 for Spanish, it was 87. And that caused me to be the second spot instead of the first spot. So when I went to the teacher and I asked him to correct it so that I could have this to take to my mom for one time I had the first spot. He said, "Do you study to learn or do you study for the grade?" I said, "Do you teach because they pay you or to teach?" And it was a similar argument.
That's a great argument. I love that because you earned that grade too. That's wow. Okay, so thanks for indulging that. I think people think that's pretty funny because it's a normal thing. It happens, but that's pretty powerful too, though. That one moment, and that's something I like to highlight as a psychologist a lot. Is that one moment in your story motivated a different move, right? So you mentioned you went kind of over towards biology. And so, was that your major? How'd you end up finishing out at UAB?
Yeah, so at that point, yeah, biology. But at that point, I had taken so many classes that could serve for both majors. But I felt that if for some reason I did not go to medical school, chemistry was something that I could do more with than biology would have been. Uh, I felt that way, and that's why I wanted to go with chemistry, because you never know what happens. Your life can change at the drop of a hat. And I think education is something that you should never belittle, no matter what type of education it is, no matter if it's no degree, no matter if it's just some classes, or if it's an associate's degree, or it's a bachelor's. I think everything that you get as part of an education, you should embrace and you should appreciate, because you never know when you become disabled or something happens, life changes, and at least what you have, nobody can take away from you. And so I said, well, what if I don't go to medical school for whatever reason? I don't make it into medical school. Well, I think chemistry I can do something with. And I had already also thought about, I liked pharmaceutical chemistry. And so one of the things that I thought about much, much earlier on in my life was to go to Germany and get a PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry and go into drug design, the good drugs though. I'm Colombian, so I have to explain.
I guess there is. I guess you sometimes do. Wow. So you do the bio. You end up. Was your degree in chemistry?
Biology. So
Biology?
my major is biology.
So you do biology. Anything else at that time? Any other significant moments?
Well, I got married.
You got married?
Yeah. Well, so
Oh.
the funny thing is that I went to Birmingham to try to, live away from home and to have the college life and all that. And I moved to Birmingham on the 17th of August of 2003, which was a Sunday. And on the 23rd of August, which was the next Saturday, I met my ex-wife. And I saw her that morning. She was an international student mentor. And I thought when I met her, she looked like a girl I had met in the Czech Republic from Ukraine. And I asked her, "Are you Ukrainian?" And she said, "No." But then we started chatting. And that night I was at a fraternity party. They're trying to recruit people. And so I went to this fraternity party, and she was in a sorority. So she was there. And it was the only person I knew in the whole party. So we talked all night. And after that, we started hanging out, and we got together, and we ended up getting married. Several months later.
Wow.
She understood that for me to, I was paying about $10,000 per semester back then to go to school. But once I became a resident, it was basically free because I had enough good grades to be able to not have to pay for school. But because I was an international student, I had to pay out-of-state tuition, no matter how long I was there.
So the residency, was that part of the motivation for the marriage?
Well, it was a reason it hastened it. We probably, we had a good relationship, and we felt that we would at some point get married. But if we do it now, it's going to help us, financially. And so we got married at the end of my junior year in May, and then that next fall semester, I didn't have to go to school anymore. So I quit school for a year, and then I paid, because at the time I owed $25,000, and so I quit school and worked for a year in an insurance company, but then I didn't have to pay for school, which was one thing. And then I repaid $18,000 out of the $25,000 that I owed. And then when I went back to school the following fall, so after skipping two semesters, fall and spring, then I only owed $7,000, and I was basically paying barely for the fees, no tuition, because I had enough good grades to go to school for free at that point. And so it saved us a lot of money doing that.
That's incredible. I want to highlight that. Almost nobody does like thinks like that. I mean, if you talk to any student, they're like, I gotta get through school. And most people are afraid to leave school because they're afraid if they leave, they won't go back. Did you ever worry that taking a year off, you
Mm,
might not?
never. I mean, it didn't cross my mind that I would just sit it out forever. You know, I had a goal.
Wow, that's powerful. I mean, to me, I resonate with that because, I'm 1 year away. I'm a dissertation away from my PhD, and I'm not avoiding it. I'm excited to write my dissertation. But this trip, it was the right time to do the trip, and so I decided let's do it. And people have asked me, well, are you worried you won't finish your PhD or you'll stop and quit? And I'm like, that doesn't even occur to me. Of course I'll finish my PhD. But I see a lot of students worry about that. Even students going from undergrad to grad school feel like they got to go right now. They're very worried they'll lose their momentum. That's really well. It speaks to the clarity of your goal. You were sure, and you had till 33, right?
Right. Right. Well, I guess technically that would have put me at 34.
No.
So maybe that's why I chose neurology. That works for a story.
That's it. I only had till 33. That's incredible. So you go back, you finish this degree. Well, what was it like graduating? Did you go to your graduation?
Yeah, of course.
What was that like? Did your family come and stuff?
Yeah, they were all very excited. It was good. But I mean, even my high school graduation was exciting. They brought my brother to it. My brother and my sister came to my high school graduation, so that was special. I was not expecting that my brother would come. I knew that my mom would come, I knew that my sister would come, but I did not expect my brother. And they told me they rented a van, and they told me, "Oh, help us with the bags in the van." And then I go to the van, and then there's my brother. So that was quite good. That was a great surprise for me.
What was so significant about your brother? Why'd that matter
It's
so
my
much?
best friend.
Really? That's powerful. Now, how much older is your brother?
7 years older.
7 years older. And you thought, so he was a surprise. Did he know that it was going to be so impactful?
Well, he knew that it was going to be a surprise because he knew that I didn't know that he was coming. My sister used to work for an airline, so I knew that she could come easily because she had the means, tickets, I mean, and my mom. But I didn't know my brother was going to come, but he did. But they've been together. They've been at every graduation, at the white coat ceremony, everything along the way. They've always been part of it.
Wow. That's incredible. So if you had to title like your college life, go back to that idea. If you had to title that chapter of your life, because there's a lot, that undergrad life, before you go to grad school, what would you title that?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. I really can't come up with any cool name for it.
Mm-hmm. I always ask that question. It seems like why does he ask that question all the time? Because it's so difficult. But I ask that question because it gets you to think a lot about, well, what were the most significant moments of that time? What kind of rises to the top? So if it comes back to you, just feel like I know the title to that time. Okay, well, let's walk me through. So med school. I mean, did they have at that time? Did you take the MCAT?
Correct.
Oh, what was that like?
Well, I have to admit I'm not very good with these tests. That's something I learned in life that I wish I had known much earlier. The one thing, when you're poor, you try to do the things in the poor way. And it's a poor person's mentality. But the thing is, you can't help it because that's all you know. Had I known then what I know now, I would have done things completely different. To give you an example, I decided I'll study myself for the MCAT. I'll buy some textbooks for preparation. But the thing is, I have an attention problem. And I have a hard time reading. I have a hard time staying on task. It's extremely hard for me. It's impossible. I can be in class and pay attention. I can typically do that. I always sit in the first seat and I try to, as much as I can, pay attention. But I have a hard time to do something by myself that requires a lot of discipline. So I said, instead of paying $3,000 or however much for this course, I'm going to do it myself. And I did. And I got a score that was enough to get me into medical school. But if I had taken a class, a good class, maybe I would have paid $3,000. but I would have had a full right to go to medical school.
I love that point, and that's something I had the same thing happen to me. Everybody told me for me I had to take the graduate record exam. I think that's it, GRE.
Mhm.
And I thought, you want to get a decent score to get into the school you need. I had no idea that they decide who gets the best fellowships largely based on those scores. So even schools now that don't require those tests to get in, those tests can be a huge difference maker in who gets the money and the fellowships and the time to devote to their studies. I really appreciate that insight. If you're listening to this, I really think you should take that into your perspective, that you should look ahead to people who've done this before and ask that question. Because I would go back and I would study 10 times more for that GRE, and I'd take it one more time because I would have got a lot more resources to do even more good with what I was trying to do. I love that advice.
Right. So I think that you invest in yourself, and that's why I think people who have a little more keep having a little more, because they are mentored by people who have experience in getting things done. You know.
I appreciate that. And it's not as simple as it seems a lot. That's a lesson I've learned too. Yes, and this is very important, there are certain times where things just aren't fair. But also, I've seen so many students who step into class, and I appreciated your point about respecting education. They step into class, they make little to no effort to form a relationship with their professor. They are only there for the grade, they study for the grade, and they're not thinking about how do they actually own and take ownership of that education and use it right now in their life. And that was always the differentiator between me and other students is I went in and I said, every class I take, I'm going to treat this as if this is my major. If it's intro to jazz, I'm a jazz major. I'm going to learn everything I can. If it's geography, I'm a geography major. And there was no difference between my psychology courses and my electives or any other class I ever took. It was always, I'm this major right now in this moment. Changed everything for me. I love that. Okay, so you take the MCAT, you get a good enough score, and then where'd you go for med school?
So South Alabama, I was put on the wait list. Of course, being in Alabama, the natural choice was UAB. I mean, that's where I was going for undergrad, and it's a great school, a great program. But they put me on the wait list. I guess I didn't really interview very well, or maybe the sum total of my profile was not great. South Alabama, they gave me an admission on the spot pretty much. I mean, it was very shortly after the interview, and they offered me a summer research program. So I said, instead of waiting around to see if UAB will take me at some point or not, I'm just going to say, let's go to Alabama. I mean, to South Alabama. And it's Mobile, so living close to the beach, which was nice. I missed being close to the beach, being in Orlando initially. So I said, yeah, let's go to Mobile. And so I moved there for the summer. I was in the summer research program. I actually got an award for that summer research program. And then I started medical school there.
Wow. Okay, so was there ever a moment where you're in medical school? I mean, you were clear that this was what your goal was, but was there ever a moment where you just were like, "Holy crap! How did I get here? How did you have any moments like that?"
Well, my first test in medical school, I'm used to, without trying to be arrogant or anything, but I was always a good student. I was always top of my class, not never, as I said, the top, but I was among the top 5, 10 in my class, typically above average grades, or always. Then first test in medical school, it was a developmental anatomy test. I scored 88. Class average was 92. I was extremely upset. I felt like medicine is not for me, or what's going on. But you have to realize that in medical school, you put everybody who was at the top of their class gets put on this class, and then of course somebody now has to be at the bottom. Somebody who's always been at the top now has to be at the bottom, because there's got to be a bottom. Not everybody can be at the top. Not everybody gets the same grade. And so that was a very humbling moment for me. And I've always been very competitive. And I said, well, there's got to be something that I can do better than these kids. I mean, they're clearly better than me at school. I can do something better than them. And I made a purpose to just be the happiest during those 4 years of medical school. So I was happy.
Wow. So your goal is, and that's fascinating. Like you're 88 to 92. And I want to stress something to people who aren't highly competitive in academics, which is totally okay. That might sound like you were still doing fine, and 88 is like a B plus. Like that sounds fine. But when you're used to academic competition, it's not fine. It doesn't feel fine. It's actually very painful, right? It's scary. It's like, am I going to lose my position? Can I actually be a neurosurgeon? And I can resonate with that. In undergrad, I almost got an A minus, but it was an error on the record, just like you had. And I went to the teacher, and the teacher corrected it. But I remember for a day before I went to that instructor being paralyzed, thinking my life was over, and I was going to have an A minus. I actually thought my whole life was going to crumble, that I was going to like become a failure in life and be scared and alone, like you mentioned. And that was paralyzing to me. And people have a domain in their life where that matters a lot, and that can happen for us academics. But you mentioned you're going to become the happiness. And that's funny. I always said I would be fit, because as I got farther in the academic world, so many people weren't fit. They didn't take care of themselves fitness wise. So I was like, I'm going to be really fit too. I'm going to have a strong fitness identity. And it did work. It took the edge off. What the heck? How do you determine you're going to be the happiest? How'd you
Well,
do it?
I think the way that I phrased it back then, I'm gonna be the one who has the most fun. That was really the way that I phrased it back then, and so I figured I'm gonna be traveling, and I'm going to be, just travel. And so, Mobile, we had a cruise ship going out of Mobile. We had one out of New Orleans. And if I had 7 days off, that was my threshold, 7 days. If I'm off for 7 days, so that included every spring break because there's 7 days, Christmas break. I mean, anytime that I was off for 7 days, I left the country every single time in the 4 years of medical school.
Every time?
Every single time.
Every single time.
If I was off for 7 days, I left the country. It didn't matter where I went. It didn't matter if it was to Canada, to Mexico, on a cruise, to Colombia, across the pond to Europe. But every time that I was off for 7 days or more, I left the country during medical school. That included if I had a test right after I came back, which I did several times.
How did you do in school doing that?
I did all right.
Yeah.
I finished top half of my class, but
Better than where you started.
better than where I started. That's right.
Wow. How did that affect your marriage during this time?
Well, unfortunately, my wife back then, she did not really like flying. She did not really like traveling that much. So we took our anniversary trip was supposed to go to Mexico, Cancun, but Hurricane Wilma came and destroyed Cancun. So we ended up going to Niagara Falls, flew through Cincinnati, and then to Niagara. And she just didn't really like flying. We went to Colombia one time, but yeah, she did not really like traveling. The cruises, that we will go together. But she hated flying. And she did on a couple of occasions, including like when we went to Canada. Um, but yeah, she didn't really like traveling that much. But I loved it. And when I started doing it, I couldn't stop doing it.
Wow. That's incredible. It's interesting too that you mentioned that you were going to have the most fun. And a part of that was actually exploring the world and widening your worldview. To people listening to Perspectivity, travel is a great way to improve your perspective. It puts you in a new context where you have to learn. You're forced to grow your mind when you travel. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
I love that. So you did all this. You walk through medical school. And how long is medical school?
4 years.
4 years. What was your lowest point in medical school?
I can tell you the lowest point in residency. I've had lots of lowest points. Uh, and medical school was really not that bad. It's just sometimes after studying a lot for a test, you would still get like a 70 something, And I mean, there were some tests that they had to curb it because, I mean, everybody basically got substandard grades. And so there would be a curve. And so sometimes after studying so much and you get a grade, I think I remember one time I got a 71 or something on, I think it was a biochemistry test, I don't remember. But that was a very low grade. I mean, it ended up working out to like an 80 after the curve, but still, you work so hard and you feel like you should know more than this, and that was a little bit tough. But again, not anything that was I need to quit this or this is not. It's just everybody was doing poorly in a
Mhm.
way. But for the amount of time that you spend studying and for how much you love what you're doing, to get such a low grade just feels like,
Did
you
you
know,
love what you were doing in medical school?
yeah, yeah. I mean, not every class, let's say, for instance, developmental anatomy is kind of hard to relate to it, even though it makes sense and it's important. But things like anatomy, I mean, it's fascinating. Physiology, pharmacology, I mean, all those things are really interesting.
That's incredible. I felt the same way through all my grad school. I always loved what I've been doing and studying, and it's made all the difference. Did you continue any of your service like you had done in undergrad
With
in med
student
school?
government, so I did my first 2 years of medical school. I was in student government at South Alabama.
You should have negotiated an ambassador position with all your traveling. You could have
Yeah.
been an ambassador from that student government to a bunch of other ones, maybe.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny because at UAB they have the ambassadors. They actually have something called the ambassadors, and I applied for it. But then that's when I quit school for that 1 year. So I got selected, but then I ended up quitting school to take that year off to work, and so I had to relinquish my position. But I had become an ambassador officially.
That's incredible. I can see you doing that. Wow. So you go through medical school. Now it's time for residency. Okay. Now, brain surgery, right? Brain surgeon. What you're getting ready for residency. What's it look like now? Is it still brain surgeon or what are you thinking?
No, so that's one thing in medical school. I think when you ask me now, I guess the toughest point of medical school was realizing that my life goal was not what I expected it would be. So that was actually, well, not only that, but I worked while I was in undergrad. I worked for a neurosurgeon doing research. Uh, Extremely smart, one of the brightest people I've met, and probably I'll know for the rest of my life. Extremely smart, Dr. Cobbs. He worked so hard. When I came to the lab in the morning, he was already there. When I left from the lab in the evening, he was still there, and he was doing research, and he was doing working clinical neurosurgery. And he had, I think, 4 kids at the time. And I felt, when does he ever get to see his kids? It's just like he has this beautiful family, uh, but he's always here. He's always at work, and that hit me a little bit the wrong way. And that was early. That was my junior year, and then of college. And then when I was in medical school, when I went to my surgery rotation, you had to get there at like 4:30 or 5 in the morning. It was so early, which I don't mind waking up early. I don't mind waking up early if I can get, like if I work 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., I'm good. From 2 p.m., I'm a free man and I can do my things, I can take care of things and all that. But if I have to be there at 5 a.m. and I have no clue what time I'm going to get out, day after day, that doesn't go well with me. As much as I love what I'm doing, it can't be all that I do. For me, I have so many interests. I can't. I don't have. I mean, I admire somebody who has such dedication to give up their life for the sake of what they do or what they love. But I love so many things that I cannot give up my life for one of the things that I love. I have to do all of the things that I love. And so when I saw how hard surgeons worked, and when you're there in surgery, they nick a vessel, and now all of a sudden you have this squirting artery, and then they have to fix it. There's no, okay, I need to go to the bathroom, I need a coffee. No, you fix it. You broke it, you fix it. And to have somebody's life so conclusively in my hands, so objectively in my hands, was something that I couldn't do. And so at that point, realizing, okay, I'm not going to go into surgery, uh, that was tough. Probably, to be honest with you, I don't think that I had the grades to go into neurosurgery anyway. I think that it would have been an uphill battle if I had wanted to. But the lifestyle was nothing that I will ever want for me anyway.
Wow. So you switched it.
I switched it. So I still liked neurology. I mean, the brain is still the most fascinating organ. And so it was a clear decision that if it's not surgery, because the surgical part is what I don't like, then, well, the medicine part of the brain is what I like. And so I ended up doing neurology.
Wow. And so where'd you go for residency?
So, there's this matching process. So you interview in different programs and you rank them in the order in which you like them, with the top choice and the bottom choice. And then they do the same thing with candidates. And so the match took me to UNC Chapel Hill.
Wow. Now, before this interview, we had talked about something that kind of steered your development to residency. You mind just telling us a little bit about that experience?
Right. So as a third-year medical student in Mobile, Alabama, one of my classmates asked me, Leo, where are you going to work? Because a white patient is going to want to have a white doctor. There's just not enough people here who look like you. And I felt, well, if this is an educated student who's third-year medical school and he thinks this, what can I expect of, the overall general less educated population? And I felt that it was probably a good thing for me to get out of Alabama.
Wow. And so that ended up changing where you had positioned yourself, right?
Right. Yeah. So Alabama, I mean, it's still, it will not be the worst thing that could happen to me to stay there. Or, I mean, it's not like I would have preferred to not do neurology than to stay at that neurology program. But then that became towards the bottom of my list.
Wow. And I want to highlight that point just because this isn't a point about what's true or not. We don't know if at that time that's true. Maybe we do know. But what's important in your life is that you believed it was. And that really affected your decision making. And as we're on this American Discovery Tour, that's something I've been hearing a lot, is that our beliefs about our culture, whether they're true or not, they really steer our choices, our decisions, and the way we experience the world around us. And so I think that's so powerful. Why would you stay in an area if you thought people didn't want your service there? You're working so hard you're having a lot of fun too, at least the most fun of the medical students. But you're working so hard to serve and help people. Definitely want to make sure you're somewhere where they're going to want your service.
Right.
That's powerful. Okay, so you go to UNC Chapel. You're in residency, and you mentioned that there's actually a lot of things that could have been low points in residency. I'm curious if you want to walk me through,
Sure.
what was that like?
So residency was brutal, dehumanizing, as I'd call it. So you're working on most weeks 80 hours. That's the limit was 80 hours back then. I don't know if there's a limit right now, but that was the limit. And as first year residents or interns, which is a first year resident, we had a 30-hour limit to our shift was 30-hour, one shift, and could be up to 30 hours. And so during ICU rotations, so I worked in the cardiac ICU and in the regular ICU. Those weeks we will work, we'll come on a Monday, say 6 a.m. until next day at noon. So you work from 6 a.m. on Monday until noon on Tuesday. Then you get to go home at noon, but the next day you're not off. You come to work maybe 7 to 3, then the next day you come 7 to 4, and then the next day you come again at 6 until noon the following day, and then the following day you're off. So you're off 4 times in 4 weeks, but then you work 80-hour weeks and you work these 30-hour shifts. And the combination of inexperience and fatigue was just too much to handle. I think that nearly broke me. And there were several times in residency when I was like, I need to quit. I want to quit. This is not worth it. That I was going crazy. And, luckily I had my mom living with me at the time, and my ex-wife was supportive. My brother was supportive. And I just kept going. But it was almost on a weekly basis you'd want to quit.
Why do they do that?
I have no clue. To be honest with you, I don't think it's necessary to go through it. And it's funny because it's not funny. It's actually kind of sad that I dissuaded a lot of people from pursuing a career in medicine while I was going through residency. Like my cousins, a couple of my cousins, they were interested in going to medicine, and I'm like, please don't, just stay away from this. This is not the way that I will want. This is not something I will wish upon my worst enemy to have to go through it. But the thing is, by then, I owe $150,000 in student loans. I mean, if I don't go through with medicine, how am I going to pay my loans, right? So, I mean, basically, uh, I mean, excuse my French, but you buy the balls. I mean, you really got to do it because there's really no way that you can afford to pay $150,000 in student loans and become a doctor and have nothing to show for it. So, if you have to go through with it.
Because you take a lot of these loans to get through med school, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's med
Because if
school
you're not
loans.
on a research fellowship, you're paying
Correct.
to get this degree. I can't understand that. My PhD is a funded PhD program, and I had mentors from the very first year of my undergrad that taught me this is how you go get funded positions. You do not take positions that aren't funded. They made it very clear to me you do not go get degrees where you pay a bunch of money and then you're trapped. And they made it a standard for me that this is what you have to do, and we'll help you do it. And because of that, I experienced so much freedom in graduate school. There was no cost. It wasn't like I'm stuck here, so I could always be connected. If I worked 80 hours one week, it was because I couldn't stop because I was having so much fun. And that's heartbreaking because knowing you for a couple days, your heart's so pure, you're so dedicated to service and helping people, and then you're in this place where you're really doing the work and you can do it, and you're being broken by it.
Right. Yeah, that was pretty tough.
Wow. I think that's just really a powerful perspective to have. So you're there in residency, you do make it through.
Yeah, miraculously.
Wow. And you kind of had to because you were like, I got to pay this off.
Right.
I can't do it. You miraculously make it through.
But I did away with the 24, well, at least for neurology, I did away with the 24-hour shifts. So when I became chief resident, I was like, well, if I quit caring about my patients by hour 20 or so, I know most people stopped at probably 13 or 14, because at that point it's just them versus you. And when you're so fatigued, you really, it's hard. I mean, it's impossible to care about anybody. Um, and so I said, nobody should have to work 24-hour shifts. Even, I mean, again, it was 30 when we started, but when I was uh, chief resident, last year resident, it was 24 hours. And I was able to do away with 24-hour shifts. I changed the schedule around so that nobody had to work 24 hours. And to my knowledge, even that was 2014, even now they still have that same rotation that I designed that avoided 24-hour shifts.
Wow, good. I'm glad to hear that. Look at you making a difference. Your student government work came to play, and you did it. And I think that's really powerful because maybe with those kinds of changes, you would encourage people to go to med school.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
now with the life that I live, but now of course it's too late because they went the different things. But now I say, well, maybe all that pain was worth it because now I can see what's after that. It's just when you're in such long tunnel, it's hard to even get perspective on what awaits you on the other side.
Wow. Yeah, I resonate with that deeply. A parallel to that for me would be depression. I've gone through very serious major depression. I've shared a lot of my story with you, but losing my parents, especially my mom, the tunnel can be so dark and so long, and you have no idea when it's going to end or how it would end or if it ends. And that I resonate with that deeply. It's amazing what happens to the brain when you're in that situation, right? It's like you're so locked in, all you can see is darkness, and all you're looking for is light. It's crazy. For you, there had to be $150,000 to pay to keep you in the tunnel. I'm glad it did because from what I've learned, you've done a lot with it. But that's wild. So walk me out of residency. Well, if you had to title residency, what would you title that chapter? Your residency.
Bottomless pit.
Bottomless pit. It's not. I recognize it's funny, but it's not funny. I've also noticed when people go through when they have clear periods of pleasure, and this is for the audience as well, I'm making this insight. When people have clear pleasure or very clear pain, it's so much easier for them to title their chapters. It's one hypothesis that I've realized. When you have that clarity, it's just so much easier. It comes right away. And I'm really curious what happens when you work on titling the chapters that you haven't. Like it's not clear. So sorry, I just wanted to give that insight to the audience as it's happening. So you go through residency and you walk out of that stage of your life. What would you say is the next defining moment after residency that kind of starts that next chapter leading into your doctor life?
Well, so I got divorced through residency.
through residency?
Right. So I got divorced through residency, and then I wanted to be close to my daughter, but what I wanted to do was cognitive neurology. So I wanted to work with dementia, Alzheimer's, that kind of thing. That's my passion. But at the time, Duke didn't have a program that I had my knowledge of that, or UNC. But I figured, well, I'm at UNC already. The easiest thing would be to stay here. And stroke was a very strong program. Their stroke program was very strong. So I figured, well, I can just stick around for one more year, do stroke, and kind of see what happens. That way I could stay local. And so I did stroke. And the year that I did stroke, which was from, the residency runs from July 1st to the next July 1st, it was 2014 through 2015, stroke became sexy because they came up with new treatment modalities for stroke patients. And so that year it became sexy. And after that, everybody needed a stroke neurologist. And so I went from going into an area where people would say, like, why are you doing stroke? It's like, what are you going to do? Give patients an aspirin and tuck them in a room until they leave? And then finally we had something to offer. We had something that changed the way that patients did and outcomes. And so it was great to be there at that moment. And it just kind of landed on my lap. I wasn't seeking fame, fortune, or anything that goes with it, but it just kind of came to me. I made a decision based on love, which was to stay close to my daughter, and that was a byproduct.
Wow. So when I think about, no, I'm going to restart that. So when I think about what you just said, that there was this huge shift in how you could offer new services for people with strokes, because my grandfather, part of what led to him passing away was a heat stroke, and I don't know if that works differently, but I didn't even know this. So 2015, 2016, there was an innovative treatment that changed what would happen. Can you explain that a little more? That's fascinating.
Right. So prior to 2014, we only had a Drano for blood vessels, or a clot buster, something that can break a clot that you give through an IV. And that's how we treated stroke. And we still do. We still use that. But for larger clots, which are very hard to dissolve even with that blood thinner, we can go through the groin and put a catheter up to the heart. I'm sorry, up to the brain, just like they do for heart catheterizations. But instead, we go to the brain and we actually pull it out, or suction it, or engage the clot with a mesh and like a stent, and then pull it out. Quite like fish it out. And that's a new thing that became the standard of care after the study came out in October of 2014. And then more studies came back the next stroke conference in 2015, and that completely revamped the way that we treat strokes. And it became much more important to have a stroke program, to have a hospital that was capable of performing that. And so everything in stroke care has changed dramatically since.
Wow. That is intense to me to even think about. This is the first time I've really thought about what it'd be like when you have a stroke. But when you're having a stroke, you essentially have a blood clot, right? And it's in the brain. Is it always in the brain?
Mm-hmm.
And so you have a blood clot in the brain, and it's disrupting your brain's ability to function, right?
Correct.
And so as a neurologist, you help with diagnosing what's happened. Is that how that works? What's your role in stroke care?
My role in stroke care, and I actually do, like, for instance, I do telestroke, which I see patients who are in rural areas of Virginia or North Carolina, and I see them because they show up to an ER that doesn't have any neurologist because it's in the middle of nowhere. And then I see them online, and I can examine the patient, and I, based on the story, based on the scans that we get, and based on how long it's been since they were completely normal, we can potentially treat them with either the clot buster or with the clot extraction, mechanical thrombectomy, we call it. And so I get to basically see these patients on an urgent basis and diagnose them, determine, yes, this looks like a stroke. B, is it safe or not to use the clot buster? C, do they qualify for mechanical thrombectomy? And then I give my impression, and then whoever The plumber, which is the person who actually does the thing, can go and do that. We can transfer the patient if that hospital is not equipped with it, typically not. But then they can get transferred to the closest facility that can offer that service. Or if they can get the clot buster, we just do it through the IV. And then that's how that
That's
works.
fascinating. I just want to touch on this because part of what I love about your story is that you built your life, and as you built this life, a product is you have this knowledge. Most people probably have no idea how this works. And what I love about that, while I'm listening to this, and this is to show my audience, while I'm listening to you tell me this, the process of me thinking about how the stroke works, I think a lot about that in our life stories. When we're trying to change our life stories, or we're trying to change the way we see the world, maybe change what people often call our mindset, you have blocks that are there. You have mental blocks that get in your way, that keep you from seeing the world in a way that'll better serve you. And you have clot busters. Like maybe you have something that you can insert into the way you think. Some people take a drug, and it radically changes the way that they think or the way they experience the world. And that's not always great because it changes other things they don't anticipate. And you also have extraction. Therapy often is extraction, or what I do professionally is coaching. You go in and you walk people through really a discovery process, and they start to find some of their own solutions. Really, sometimes it's preventative care. And that's actually my last question on that in the stroke world. Is there preventative care that people could take to pay attention, make sure these clots don't happen, or even get early detection or awareness of stuff like that happening?
Right. So a healthy lifestyle. So there's primary prevention and secondary prevention. Primary prevention, preventing something from happening that has never happened. And then there's not a whole lot of that other than a healthy lifestyle, having good cholesterol profile and not having high blood pressure, or addressing it if you have it. Not smoking. Smoking is a risk factor. So is risk factor avoidance. But then there's secondary prevention, which means once you've had a stroke, how do you keep from having another one? Because once you have a stroke, that becomes your main risk factor. The fact that you've had a stroke, it's already the strongest risk factor. And so in that case, aspirin and statin, although these have not necessarily been shown to be good for primary prevention, because more people will be harmed by long-standing use of these medications. But once you've had one, then you need them.
That's really powerful. I appreciate you enlightening us on that, because our brain and our bodies, we need that for our life story. We need that to navigate life. And that's something I've noticed about you. You're so healthy in so many ways. You're so vibrant. At least that's what it feels like. And maybe there's more to that story, but there's some vibrancy about you. And that's what's inspired me over the last couple of days I've been with you. You have a vitality. I think a lot of people are looking for that, which it sounds like residency almost broke it.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds like it almost broke it there.
I still did travel through residency as much as I could. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So your commitment to that was a non-negotiable for you.
No, I can't stop doing it. I'll die traveling. But even, like, for instance, the October of my first year of residency, I remember I went to Norway and Latvia, Lithuania. That's just one that I remember. But every time that I'm off, I keep doing it.
Wow. That is powerful that you have that. For me, fitness is a non-negotiable. Even on this tour, I go to the gym every day because for me, that's what's most important. For me, that's what makes me feel healthy. That's what makes me feel happy. For you, travel is like a cornerstone to that. What's most important to you? It's absolutely incredible. Okay. So post-residency, you made travel a non-negotiable. You're doing what you were passionate about, even when you got this thing that's going to break you. So what about life now? How is life now, post-residency? And obviously there's been some time in between. But now, after you've done that, what would you say life looks like in this current stage of your life?
Oh, no, it's great. These are the sweet moments. This is the culmination of all that effort, all those sacrifices that were made through the earlier years, now just bear fruit. And as I told you, the stroke became sexy, so there were lots of positions open. I interviewed in 4 places out of fellowship, got offered 4 jobs. I basically picked and choose and made the best of everything and picked the perfect place. I moved to Charleston, South Carolina. I was director of the program. It was great. And then I moved to be closer to my daughter here to North Carolina. As you know, I work 1 week, I'm off 2 weeks. During my 2 weeks off, I travel. During my week on, I'm completely devoted to my patients. And it's great work-life balance for me.
It's incredible. And yeah, that's wild for people to get a perspective. Your current job, you work 1 week, and you explained it to us, right? That allows you to be fully present and dedicated to your patients while you're there. And then 2 weeks you have off. And what's your goal in those 2 weeks off?
Well, so I've been doing the last few years, I've been doing a lot of family gathering, I guess. Uh, I've gone to Colombia several times, trying to organize the 4 trunks of my family. So each grandparent and their ancestors, and uh, I look at, say, my grandfather's grandparents, and then I look at all their siblings and all of their descendants. And so it's given me thousands of new cousins. I've talked to about 2,000, and I've met about 850 in person throughout the world, primarily in Colombia, but several in the United States, some in Europe, some as far as Dubai.
Do you think that bit of loneliness that comes from American culture or from that change to American culture has motivated that at all?
I think so. I think that you appreciate what you don't have. And I think that moving away from my family, in Colombia, and I think that has taught me the value of family more than I ever had it present in my life when I had it with me all the time.
Wow. I just want to, that actually hit me really deep because this week I saw my aunt, who I haven't seen since 2016. And it's my mom's sister, or my dad's sister, sorry. And when I first saw her, my eyes just lit up. I mean, I was so excited to see her, and I couldn't stop looking at her. And I was mesmerized by everything she did. Every smile that she made, every laugh that she had. I was just completely enamored with my aunt, and I was shocked, and my whole world felt different. It was like I was on a drug, and it was a powerful feeling. And then when we got here, and each morning we would come down and we'd have breakfast with you and your wife, and we would have dinner together, and we just sit at this little table. I mean, we should really show people. We're sitting at a table. You have the means to have the nicest table in the world, and you're eating at this nice little square, humble table with simple chairs, and it didn't matter at all because we were fully engaged, talking with each other, learning about each other. And I felt that. I felt how much you honored even that time to someone who's just walked into your life a couple days ago. I felt like family. Thank you for that.
Oh, no, thank you guys for coming. It's been great having you here. I knew it was going to be great. We shared the enthusiasm to learn about other people. And I think that's great. You want to look at this country. You're from this country. I mean, this is an amazing country. I mean, it's my home country, even though I'm not from here, but I feel like this is home. This country gave me the opportunities that my own country didn't. And I love this country. And my exploration is I want to see the world, but I think that I applaud you because I could have chosen to explore the United States. I haven't even been to half the states. I think I've been to 27 or so, but there's so much to see here, and you're doing it. And the fabric of this country is diversity, and I think that it's a great thing that you're going through this, and I really applaud your efforts, and I'm really happy to see where this project goes.
I really appreciate that. With that being said, one thing I like to close these interviews with asking you, with everything that you thought about today and that you've been thinking about through your life, what's a life lesson or a core value that you try to live your life by right now?
Well, one of the things that I've been recently inspired by is the fact that the most important things in life are a given. The most important things in life are free. You wake up every morning and you don't realize how fortunate you are. And you can move, you can see, I mean, just think about how much would you give if you lost your sight right now. How much would you pay to get it back? You give everything you have, but you already have it. And so we go looking for more, we go trying to build, we have everything. I mean, at the end of the day, what I mean, okay, you have 1 million, you have 2 million, you have 5 million. I mean, what are you going to do with it? You see, to me, money. I'm not going to say it's not important, because it is, but it's by no means in the top 10 of the most important things in life. I can quit my job right now, and I can live relatively okay. Because I don't really need much to live. I grew up in a very austere environment, and I learned to make the best out of what I had, and I can go back to that happily. I will go back to move in my same house. When I go to Colombia, I stay at my house where I grew up, and I stay there. My mom lives there, and I mean, which is the most important thing. I mean, I can go and stay in any hotel in the city, and okay, on occasion we go and we pamper ourselves for 1 or 2 days. Uh, but I stay home because that's home. There's no place like home.
There's no place like home. That's so beautiful. All right.